The six-stage revolution cycle, France, Russia, Cuba, USA, is at stage 4. In the shadowed annals of history, a chilling cycle has repeated itself, unraveling empires and dictatorships alike. Over the past 250 years, this inexorable pattern has claimed three mighty governments: France in 1789, Russia in 1917, and Cuba in 1959, each collapsing under the weight of their own hubris. And now, in 2025, the United States treads the same bloodstained path, grievance upon grievance, as if scripted by fate itself. What begins as whispers of discontent escalates into cataclysmic upheaval, where the powerful fall and chaos reigns. Imagine a nation at the pinnacle of power, only to be devoured by the flames it ignited. This is not mere speculation. It's a blueprint etched in revolution's fire. As we delve into this cycle, feel the echoes of guillotines, gunfire, and desperate cries, reminders that no regime is eternal, and the United States stands perilously at stage 4, with the abyss of 5 and 6 looming near. To grasp this cycle, we must first immerse ourselves in the historical crucible where it forged. Revolutions are not born of fleeting anger or isolated protests. They erupt when the very fabric of society tears apart. Picture France in the late 18th century, a beacon of enlightenment amid Europe's darkness. Paris pulsed with intellectual fervor, Voltaire's wit, Rousseau's philosophies, the grandeur of Versailles. Yet, beneath this veneer of sophistication lay a festering divide. King Louis XVI, well-meaning but woefully inept, presided over a realm where opulence mocked misery. The monarchy, entrenched for 8 centuries, seemed impervious to change. But revolutions thrive not on poverty alone, which has plagued humanity eternally, but on shattered expectations. When the masses perceive a yawning chasm between what they endure and what they deserve, the social contract fractures. As Alexis de Tocqueville later reflected, it's the proximity to prosperity that fuels the fire, not its absence, a poignant irony that amplifies the emotional toll, turning quiet resentment into seething rage. Echoing across centuries, Russia in 1917 mirrored this prelude. The Romanov dynasty, spanning 300 years, lorded over a colossal empire from the Baltic to the Bering Sea. Tsar Nicholas II, a man of faith but fatal flaws, clung to autocratic illusions amid a world hurtling toward modernity. The peasantry, emancipated from serfdom in 1861, still toiled under noble landlords, their lives a grind of endless labor and meager yields. In urban factories, workers endured brutal shifts, their children sacrificed to machines, while the elite waltzed through gilded balls. World War I amplified this agony, a senseless slaughter that drained Russia's blood and treasure. 3 million casualties, supply lines in tatters, soldiers starving in trenches. These were not abstract statistics, but human tragedies, families shattered, dreams extinguished. The Tsar's detachment, influenced by the enigmatic Rasputin, evoked a profound sense of betrayal, much like Louis's reliance on frivolous courtiers. Here, incompetence wasn't just policy, it was a moral failing that eroded the soul of a nation. Then came Cuba in 1959, a stark contrast, yet bound by the same threads. Unlike the feudal backwaters of France or Russia, Cuba shimmered with mid-20th century promise. Havana's neon-lit casinos and bustling streets drew American tourists, symbolizing a vibrant economy fueled by sugar exports and foreign investment. Yet, this facade concealed rural destitution, where peasants in the Sierra Maestra scraped by without schools or clinics, their labor enriching absentee owners. President Fulgencio Batista, who seized power in the 1952 coup, embodied corruption's grotesque face elections rigged, dissent silenced through torture, mobsters like Meyer Lansky skimming fortunes with his complicity. This era's inequality wasn't archaic, it was modern exploitation, where American corporations siphoned wealth, leaving echoes of colonial plunder. The emotional weight? A generation of young Cubans, educated yet disenfranchised, felt the sting of potential unfulfilled, their aspirations crushed under Batista's boot. In comparing these contexts, we see a universal truth. Revolutions ignite not in isolation, but when historical grievances compound, creating a powder keg of unmet hopes and institutional decay. Now, the pattern reveals itself a 6-stage descent into oblivion, as predictable as the tides, yet as devastating as a storm. Stage 1. Extreme wealth inequality, the silent architect of unrest. In France, the Third Estate 98.5% of the population bore the tax burden, while clergy and nobility luxuriated tax-free, owning vast lands. Bread riots in 1788, triggered by harvest failures, exposed this rift. Peasants starved as courtiers feasted. Russia echoed this with 80% peasants landless, factories grinding souls for pennies, while the Tsar indulged in extravagance. Cuba's divide was urban-rural. Havana's elite prospered, but rural masses languished, profits fleeing to foreign pockets. Analytically, this stage isn't mere disparity. It's a psychological fracture where visibility of wealth, palaces versus hovels, breeds envy and erodes solidarity. Historically, it parallels the Gilded Age's excesses, but here it sets the emotional stage for betrayal, whispering that the system favors the few at the expense of the many. Stage 2, government corruption and incompetence, where leaders accelerate their own downfall. Louis XVI's bankruptcy from wars, including aiding America's revolution, led to futile tax hikes on the poor, blocked by privileged estates. His indecisiveness mirrored Nicholas II's divine right delusions, culminating in Bloody Sunday's massacre and World War I's debacles. Batista's regime was a kleptocracy. Courts bought, opponents vanished, corruption not hidden but flaunted. This stage's analysis reveals a tragic hubris. Rulers, insulated by power, ignore reforms, much like emperors fiddling while Rome burns. Emotionally, it evokes despair, as citizens realize their guardians are predators, fostering a collective grief that hardens into resolve. Stage 3, the middle class destroyed and radicalized, the pivotal turn. In France, the Estates General of 1,789 backfired. The Third Estate, including merchants and lawyers, formed the National Assembly, vowing constitutional change in the tennis court oath, a defiant act of intellectual rebellion. Russia's Duma and mutinous soldiers in 1917 marked this shift, intellectuals allying with workers. In Cuba, Fidel Castro, a privileged lawyer, attacked Moncada barracks in 1953. His history will absolve me speech, igniting educated youth. Comparatively, this stage underscores that revolutions are led not by the destitute, but by those with dashed expectations, teachers, professionals who channel frustration into ideology. The emotion? A bittersweet awakening where hope curdles into radicalism, drawing parallels to past uprisings like the American Revolution's enlightened patriots. Stage 4, loss of faith in institutions, the irreversible breach. France's storming of the Bastille in 1789 symbolized this as monarchy and church crumbled. Russia's provisional government post-abdication lost credence by prolonging the war. Cuba's populace turned as Batista's atrocities alienated even allies, US support waning. Analytically, this is the social contract's death knell. When courts, elections, and police are deemed partisan tools, reform seems futile. Kennedy's words ring true. Those who make peaceful revolution impossible will make violent revolution inevitable. Emotionally, it's a profound disillusionment, a nation's trust evaporating like morning mist, leaving only volatility. Stage 5, revolutionary movements gain mass support the moment the fire leaps from ember to inferno. In France, the Jacobins, once marginal radicals, suddenly spoke for the starving streets of Paris. Robespierre's promises of purity and vengeance drowned out the moderates. In Russia, Lenin's train rolled into Petrograd in April 1917, and within 6 months, the Bolsheviks, who had been a fringe sect, commanded the Soviets and the rifles. In Cuba, by late 1958, peasants who had never heard the word socialism were hiding bearded fighters in their huts because Castro had become the living symbol of retribution against Batista's torturers. The pattern is merciless. When moderates fail to deliver bread or dignity, the people do not drift toward compromise, they sprint toward the most uncompromising voices. Those voices always promise 3 things: punishment of the guilty, redistribution of the loot, and a radiant future. They never mention the price. Stage 6, the old order is overthrown, and chaos devours everything it touches. The king's head rolls in the Place de la Revolution while the crowd cheers, then wakes up the next morning to find the guillotine still hungry. The Tsar and his children are bayoneted in a basement in Yekaterinburg, and the civil war that follows kills more Russians than all of World War I. Batista boards a plane with suitcases of cash on New Year's Day 1959. And within months, the revolutionary tribunals are working 3 shifts. In every case, the revolution eats its parents, then its children, then its chroniclers. The moderates who thought they were steering the movement discovered they were only the kindling. What emerges on the other side is almost never the promised utopia. It is exhaustion, terror, and a new, harder tyranny wearing the old one's blood as cologne. Now, turn your gaze to the United States, November 2025. The cycle is not approaching, it is already coiled around the Republic's throat. Stage 1 extreme wealth inequality is no longer in dispute. The top 0.1% now hold more wealth than the bottom 90%, a concentration unseen since the eve of the Great Depression and far sharper than pre-revolutionary France. Private rockets pierce the sky, while tent cities spread beneath freeway overpasses. The median young American earns less in real terms than their parents did at the same age, while the Forbes list adds a new billionaire every 30 hours. The resentment is no longer theoretical. It is visceral, cellular. Stage 2, government corruption and incompetence has become the nightly soundtrack. Congress enjoys a 15% approval rating yet re-elects itself at 95%. The national debt stands at $36 trillion and accelerating. Insider trading by lawmakers is barely even scandalous anymore. It is background noise. Both parties promise to drain the swamp and instead install revolving doors plated with gold. The average citizen no longer believes government is incompetent by accident. They believe it is incompetent by design. Stage 3, the hollowing and radicalization of the middle class, is in full bloom. A college degree, once the ticket to stability, now often guarantees 6 figures of debt and a gig economy hustle. Home ownership for those under 35 has fallen off a cliff. Fertility rates collapse because young couples cannot imagine affording children. On campus, in comment sections, in private discords, the language has shifted from reform the system to burn it down. The professional class engineers, nurses, teachers now openly discuss collapse the way their grandparents discuss retirement plans. Stage 4, loss of faith in institutions, is where we live right now. Trust in the Supreme Court has cratered. Trust in the electoral system is split cleanly along partisan fault lines. Roughly half the country is convinced 2020 was stolen. The other half is convinced admitting that would be treason. The FBI, the CDC, the mainstream media, the university, every referee of reality is seen as a paid player for the other team. When both sides believe the institutions are weapons aimed at them, the shared country dissolves. There is only territory left to fight over. Stage 5 has not fully crystallized, but its silhouette is unmistakable. On the left, slogans like "billionaires should not exist" poll better every year. On the right, calls for a national divorce or a strong hand to restore order are no longer confined to the darkest forums. Extremist groups, some with uniforms, some with manifestos, some with venture capital funding, are recruiting faster than at any time since the 1,930 seconds. The center is not holding, it is evaporating. All that remains is to see which movement perfects the simpler promise, the clearer enemy, the louder megaphone. Stage 6 is still over the horizon, but history whispers that the horizon is closer than it appears. When it comes, it will not look like 1,789 with powdered wigs and pikes. It will look like power grid failures, supply chain seizures, blue cities and red counties refusing to recognize the same currency, the same laws, the same flag. It will look like politicized generals choosing sides, like private security forces larger than most national armies, like foreign intelligence services fanning flames they never had to light themselves. And when the smoke finally clears, if it ever does, what rises will not be the America of the Founding Fathers or even the America of the New Deal. It will be something leaner, harder, and infinitely more scarred. France thought its culture would save it. Russia thought its size would save it. Cuba thought its prosperity would save it. They were all wrong. The pattern does not negotiate. It does not grant exemptions for exceptionalism. It only asks one question. When the social contract is shredded, the institutions discredited, and the middle class radicalized, who still believes peaceful change is possible? If your answer is almost no one, then you already know where we are, and you already know what comes next. The camera lingers on a quiet American street at dusk, children's bicycles abandoned on lawns, a flag hanging limp in the still air, the faint sound of a television murmuring inside a darkened house. Everything looks normal. Everything is already over. History does not repeat itself, Mark Twain said, but it rhymes. The rhyme is now definite. In 1789, they laughed at the idea that peasants could march on Versailles. In 1917, they toasted the tercentenary of the Romanov dynasty only months before the palace was stormed. In 1958, Batista threw a New Year's Eve party for Havana's elite, while Fidel's columns were already descending from the mountains. Every single time, the people who owned the present were blind to the future because they believed their version of the story was the only one that would ever be told. Tonight, in 2025, that same blindness is pandemic. The think tank reports speak of manageable polarization. The cable news anchors assure us that institutions are holding. The billionaires build fortified estates in New Zealand and call it diversification. They are wrong. The pattern has never been stopped once stage 4 was reached. Not once. Not by enlightened kings, not by provisional governments, not by American-backed dictators. Revolutions do not pause for economic recovery packages or bipartisan commissions. They accelerate when the moderates run out of excuses. So what is the only recorded way to break the cycle? Radical, genuine, visible reform delivered before the revolutionary movement perfects its slogan. Louis XVI could have saved his throne by abolishing feudal privileges in 1787 instead of 1789. Nicholas II could have kept his crown with a real constitution in 1905 instead of cosmetic concessions in 1917. Batista could have held fair elections in 1958 instead of torturing students. Every time the window was there, every time the elites chose comfort over concession. Every time they calculated that the mob would stay quiet a little longer. And every time the math was wrong. America still has a window, but it is measured in months, perhaps a few short years, not decades. Close the wealth gap with brutal, unapologetic taxation on extreme fortunes. Break the stranglehold of money on politics. Restore faith in elections with transparent, fortress-like integrity. Punish corruption wherever it sits, left, right, or corporate. Do it fast, do it loud, do it so visibly that even the angriest citizen can see the system finally bleeding for them instead of on them. If that sounds impossible, you understand the gravity, because the alternative is already rehearsing in the shadows. There are men and women right now, some in uniforms, some in hoodies, some in tailored suits who are writing manifestos, stockpiling supplies, mapping infrastructure nodes, and waiting for the week the institutions finally crack. They will not wait forever. The guillotine was not invented by monsters. It was invented by a physician who wanted executions to be more humane. The Cheka was not founded by sadists. It was founded by idealists who believed terror was temporary. La Cabanda's firing squads in 1959 were manned by yesterday's university students who only wanted justice. Revolutions always begin with people who sound reasonable until they are reasonable no longer. Look out your window tonight. That quiet street, those sleeping children, that tired flag, it can all survive, but only if the people who still hold power choose to remember what France, Russia, and Cuba forgot. The fire you refuse to put out in time will eventually warm itself with your house. This is not the end of the story. It is the last moment before the page turns. Whether the next chapter is written in reform or in blood is no longer a question for historians. It is a question for you, for all of us. Right now, silence, a single heartbeat of black screen. The cycle is not destiny, but it is gravity, and we are already in freefall. The screen stays black for 3 full seconds. Only the low hum of distant city traffic, then a single voice calm, almost a whisper, but carrying the weight of centuries. We have reached the end of the line that history allows us to speak with certainty. Everything that follows is no longer analysis. It is prophecy written in the margins of older books, in blood that has already dried. Stage 5 begins the day a movement no longer a fringe, no longer a meme, no longer dismissible offers the exhausted middle a promise simpler than any politician can match. Not hope and change, not make America great again. Something shorter, something that fits on a flag, on a patch, on the side of a rifle. 3 words, 2 words, 1 word. The shorter the promise, the faster it spreads. That day is closer than any blue ribbon panel will admit. You can already hear it being workshopped in private discords, in rural militia radios, in urban mutual aid networks that stopped pretending aid is the only thing they're mutually preparing for. They are not waiting for permission. They are waiting for the moment the center proves once and for all that it cannot hold. When that moment arrives, the transfer of legitimacy will be instantaneous. 1 week, the FBI is controversial. The next week, it is irrelevant. 1 month, the dollar is shaky. The next month, people are bartering ammunition and antibiotics. 1 year, the federal government still technically exists. The next year, no commercial flight will land in half the country because the control towers answer to someone else. France took 5 years from Bastille to Thermidor. Russia took 8 months from February to October. Cuba took 24 months from the Granma landing to Batista's flight. The tempo is accelerating. The United States will not be granted the luxury of a slow motion collapse. Our collapse will be 4 kelvins, 240 frames per second, live streamed to 1 billion phones while the grid flickers out. And when the smoke rises, the rest of the world will not send rescue ships. They will send cameras, because the fall of the last empire is the greatest reality show ever produced. But there's one sentence, one fragile, almost embarrassing sentence that still has the power to stop the cycle cold. A sentence no one in power wants to say because it cost them everything they have spent their lives accumulating. We were wrong. Take whatever you need from us to make this right. Now, before it is too late. Hola. If that sentence is spoken, truly spoken, not as theater by enough of the people who own the private jets, the media conglomerates, the hedge funds, the Senate seats, if they voluntarily open the gates instead of waiting for them to be torn down, then the page can still turn without catching fire. History records no instance of this happening. Not once. But history also records no instance of a society that could watch its own autopsy in real time on TikTok. We are the first generation that can see the guillotine being sharpened while it is still just a viral video. That changes the math. So this is no longer a documentary about the past. This is a message sent forward from the 18th of November 2025 to whatever is left on the other side. If you are watching this after the grid went dark, if you are watching this by firelight, if you are watching this at all, remember that someone saw it coming. Remember that someone begged the people at the top to choose concession over conflagration. Remember that someone told you the cycle is not destiny, only gravity. And gravity can be defied, but only by those willing to fall upward. The screen fades to a single line of white text on black. The revolution is not coming. It is already here. It is wearing your face. It is waiting for your choice. 10 seconds of absolute silence. Then the soft click of a tape recorder stopping. This transmission is complete. The black screen holds for one more heartbeat. Then a single candle flickers to life in the darkness. It is the only light left. A voice. Lower now, almost intimate, as if speaking directly into your ear across the years that may or may not come. If you are still here, if the signal still reaches you, then know this. The people who will decide the next chapter are not in Washington. They are not in Davos or Silicon Valley or on the Forbes list. They are in the house next to yours. They are the nurse working 3 shifts who hasn't had a raise in 6 years. They are the veteran sleeping in his truck because the VA waitlist is endless. They are the 35-year-old software engineer who just realized he will never own the home his parents bought at 25. They are tired. They are armed. They are done asking. And the only thing that still stands between their exhaustion and the point of no return is a question no one has answered honestly in a very long time. What are you personally willing to give up so that they don't have to take it? Not rhetoric. Not a tax credit. Not another blue ribbon commission. Real skin in the game, real sacrifice, real surrender of privilege before it is torn away. Because if that sacrifice does not come voluntarily, it will come involuntarily. History is merciless on this point. The candle flame trembles, then steadies. This is the final frame. There will be no more parts after this. No more continue. No more polite pauses. The next sound you hear will not be my voice. It will be the match striking. Or it will be the gates opening. Choose. The candle goes out. Total darkness. Total silence.